Okay, so imagine that you're reading about some groundbreaking new treatment. It could be a game changer, maybe even offering some hope where there was none before. But have you ever thought about who makes all that science you're reading understandable? Who takes like all that raw data and turns it into something that could, change people's lives?
Well, that's where medical writers come in. They're kind of like these unsung heroes in the medical world. They're the ones who take the really complicated research and make it clear and concise. They turn it into a story that can actually make a difference.
Yeah, exactly. And it's what we're going to be looking at today. We're doing a deep dive into the world of medical writing in clinical research. And we're using this presentation by Hemangini Patel from Gujarat University's clinical research programs as our guide.
Yeah, it's a pretty fascinating look into this field that most people don't even know exists. It covers pretty much everything from like what medical writing is to the different types, what makes a good writer, and even how to get started in this career if you're interested.
So yeah, get ready because we're about to uncover the secrets of medical writing. And we'll explore why it's so important for bringing these, life-changing discoveries to everyone.
So the presentation starts off by defining what medical writing is. It basically describes it as the process of creating scientific documents for different purposes.
Okay, so pretty straightforward, right? But I'm guessing there's a little more to it than that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's not just writing. It's about creating these documents in a way that's standardized, comprehensive, and, reliable, all while being well written and, importantly, persuasive.
Persuasive. So like a lawyer arguing a case.
Yeah, kind of. Think about it. You have this complex research data, and it needs to be understood by a certain audience. Like maybe it's regulatory bodies who decide on drug approvals, or healthcare professionals making treatment decisions, or even just the general public trying to understand the latest health news. So a medical writer's job is to present that data in a way that's clear and logical, but ultimately they have to make it convincing.
So it's not just about the facts, but tailoring the message to whoever's reading it. That makes a lot of sense.
Exactly. And that's where the real skill comes in. It's taking this complicated information and making it accessible and understandable without losing any of the accuracy.
So then who are these medical writers? The presentation mentions they're not usually the scientists or doctors doing the research.
Right. They might not be on the front lines of the research itself, but they play a crucial role in communicating the findings to the rest of the world.
So they're like specialized communicators, bridging that gap between the complexities of the research and the need for clear information.
That's a great way to put it. And medical writers don't necessarily need to be medical professionals themselves, but having a strong science background definitely helps.
So someone with a background in like biology, chemistry, or even engineering could get into medical writing.
Absolutely. Actually, a lot of medical writers do have formal training in a science field, which helps them understand the technical details of the research, and then they can really evaluate the information they're presenting.
That's really interesting. The presentation also mentions how important ethics and project management skills are for medical writers, which seems pretty important given the kind of work they do.
Oh, absolutely. Medical writing isn't just about scientific accuracy. It's about responsible communication. These writers need to understand the ethics involved in research and make sure that the documents they create follow all the rules and guidelines.
So they're upholding the integrity of the scientific process, which adds another layer of importance to their role.
Exactly. And speaking of integrity, I think this is a good time to mention an organization that really embodies that. London Heartbeat's Z Academy in the UK.
They're doing some amazing work in healthcare education. They offer over 140 courses and are making quality learning accessible to everyone.
Yeah, if you're at all interested in learning more about healthcare, maybe even diving deeper into medical writing, you should definitely check them out. They have a ton of information on their website, and you can find them on social media too.
Yeah, that's right. They're on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube. You can easily stay up to date on their courses and join in on some really great discussions like this one. Don't miss out. Go subscribe.
Now, getting back to our deep dive here, the presentation goes on to explore the different types of medical writing you find in clinical research.
Yeah, and it breaks them down into three main categories: regulatory, educational, and medico-marketing. Let's start with regulatory medical writing. What exactly is that?
So as the name suggests, it's focused on creating documents for regulatory authorities, like the FDA in the US, the EMEA in Europe, and the DCGI in India.
So we're talking about the writing that makes sure new drugs, devices, or treatments get approved for clinical trials, and then eventually make their way to patients.
Exactly. These documents can include submissions for new clinical trials, applications for marketing approval, and even detailed reports on those clinical trials.
Sounds incredibly detailed and like there's no room for mistakes.
Yeah. You're right about that. These documents have to follow very specific regulations and guidelines. And the information presented needs to be really precise and comprehensive. It has to accurately reflect all the data gathered during the development of a medical product.
I can see why this type of writing would need a very specific skill set.
Oh, for sure. Accuracy and attention to detail are super important here. Any mistakes could have serious consequences.
Okay, so let's move on to educational medical writing. What's the main focus there?
So educational medical writing aims to inform a specific audience about medical topics. And this audience can be healthcare practitioners or even the general public.
So it's taking that complex medical information and making it understandable for different groups of people.
Exactly. Think about the literature that comes with new products, presentations at conferences, summaries for investigators, even patient information leaflets. All of that falls under educational medical writing.
Wow, that's quite a variety. It sounds like educational medical writers need to be really versatile, adapting their writing style to different audiences and formats.
Definitely. They need to be able to explain complex concepts clearly and concisely, whether they're writing for a doctor or someone with no medical background at all.
Okay, and now for the last category, medico-marketing, or medical affairs writing. What's unique about this type?
This area focuses on creating marketing materials for promoting therapeutic products ethically. So think about things like detailed product monographs, training resources for sales teams, or even those CME slides you see at medical conferences.
So it's about communicating the benefits of a medical product, but still following ethical guidelines and regulations.
Exactly. It's a tricky balance between promoting a product and making sure the information is accurate and balanced, and making sure it doesn't cross any ethical lines.
Sounds like a challenging but really important role,
Yeah.
especially in an industry where trust and accurate information are so important.
You're absolutely right. Medical affairs writers need to deeply understand both the science behind the product and the marketing side of things to effectively communicate a product's value.
So we've got these three main types of medical writing: regulatory, educational, and medico-marketing. But where does medical writing fit within the broader world of scientific writing? The presentation talks about this distinction, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it.
It's definitely an important difference, and the presentation explains it really well. Scientific writing covers a much wider range of topics, like anything from astronomy to zoology. But medical writing is specifically focused on health and medicine, so it's like a specialized branch of scientific writing.
So I guess you could say that all medical writers are science writers, but not all science writers are medical writers.
Exactly.
Okay, so now that we've got that figured out, let's talk about what it actually takes to be a good medical writer. What are the skills and qualities someone needs to really thrive in this field?
Well, the presentation highlights a bunch of important attributes, and they really show just how multifaceted this profession really is.
Okay, so let's break it down. What's at the top of the list?
One of the most important things is being able to understand the purpose and requirements of each project.
Right, because each project is different, so a writer needs to be adaptable.
Exactly. They need to see the big picture, understand the goals, and then tailor their writing to meet those objectives. Sometimes they'll be writing for experts, other times it'll be for general audience. So yeah, being adaptable is super important.
And speaking of audiences, I imagine being able to write for a specific target audience is pretty important too.
Oh, it's absolutely essential. A good medical writer can easily switch gears. Like one day, they might be writing a super technical document for a regulatory body, and then the next day they're crafting patient-friendly materials.
So versatility is key. The presentation also mentioned thorough research as an important skill.
Right, medical writers don't just rehash old information. They have to really dig deep into the subject matter. They conduct thorough research and then synthesize that complex information into clear and concise writing.
They're kind of like detectives in a way, uncovering those key insights and then weaving them into a compelling story. What other skills are essential?
The presentation really emphasizes logical thinking and organization. A good medical writer can structure their thoughts and ideas so that they're clear, logical, and easy to follow.
So it's not just about having the information, but also presenting it in a way that makes sense and guides the reader through it.
Exactly. And of course, scientific accuracy is absolutely crucial. Every fact, every figure, every claim has to be carefully checked and verified.
No room for error there. Attention to detail must be super important as well.
Absolutely. A good medical writer is meticulous. They pay attention to every word, every sentence, every reference to make sure the final document is perfect.
They're like the guardians of accuracy and clarity. And I bet teamwork and communication are important too. especially since they often work with researchers and other experts.
You got it. Medical writing is very collaborative, so a good medical writer needs to be a good communicator. They have to be able to clearly explain their ideas, listen to feedback, and work well with others.
It's a good reminder that even though writing is a big part of the job, it's not a solitary profession.
Right. And last but not least, good time management and a strong commitment to meeting deadlines are essential.
Yeah, that makes sense, especially when you're juggling multiple projects with tight deadlines. So to sum it up, a successful medical writer needs a mix of scientific knowledge, writing skills, attention to detail, and a collaborative spirit.
I think that's a great summary. It's definitely a demanding job. But it's also really rewarding. You're playing a vital role in advancing medical knowledge and ultimately improving patient care.
So now that we understand what makes a good medical writer, let's look at the process of actually creating those scientific documents. The presentation outlines the steps involved, and I'm really curious to learn more about the practical side of things.
It's a pretty fascinating process, and the presentation breaks it down into these clear, manageable stages.
Okay, so what's the first step?
It all starts with understanding the project brief.
So this is where the writer gets a clear picture of what they need to do.
Exactly. It involves understanding who the target audience is, the purpose of the document, the key messages they need to get across, and any specific requirements or guidelines.
So it's like laying the foundation for a house. You need to know what you're building before you start. What comes after that?
Once the brief is clear, the next step is literature search and review.
This is where the detective work really begins, right?
Absolutely. The writer needs to gather all the information and research to support their writing. They'll look at existing literature, analyze data, and familiarize themselves with the latest research in that area.
It's about building that solid foundation of knowledge to make sure the document is accurate and up to date.
Precisely. And once all that research is done, the writer can move on to the actual writing, authoring and compiling the document.
This is where the magic happens. I imagine this stage involves a lot of drafts and revisions, lots of fine-tuning to get it just right.
You're exactly right. It's a process where the writer shapes the information into a clear and coherent narrative. They carefully structure the document, craft strong arguments, and make sure everything flows logically.
So it's more than just putting words on paper. It's about creating a piece of writing that really engages the reader and gets the information across.
That's the goal. And once that first draft is done, the document goes into the review process.
And that's where feedback comes in, right?
Exactly. The document is shared with experts, editors, and other stakeholders, and they'll provide feedback and suggestions for improvement.
So it's a collaborative effort to make sure the document is accurate, clear, and meets the needs of the audience.
Precisely. And after the writer incorporates all that feedback, it's time for formatting and editing.
So this is where the document gets polished and refined.
Exactly. It's formatted according to specific guidelines, making sure it's consistent and visually appealing. Editors go through the text carefully. They check for grammar, punctuation, style, and overall clarity.
So they're making sure the document is not only informative, but also easy to read and visually appealing, which can make a big difference in how well the information is received.
Absolutely. And then once the document is finalized, it's time for approval and sign-off.
So everyone involved gives their final stamp of approval.
Yep. The document goes around to everyone for their signatures, which basically means they agree with the content and that it's ready for publication or submission.
It's like the final checkpoint before the document is released into the world. What's the last step in this whole process?
The final step is electronic publishing or submission.
So this is where the document actually reaches its audience, whether it's a regulatory body, a scientific journal, or the general public.
Exactly. The document is uploaded to the right platform so that everyone who needs it can access it. And that's basically the journey of a scientific document, from the initial idea all the way to publication.
It's pretty amazing to see how much work and attention to detail goes into creating these documents. It's definitely more involved than I thought.
It is a complex process, but it's crucial. And before we jump into some practical do's and don'ts of medical writing, let's take a quick break. We'll come back and uncover those insider tips.
Okay, so we're back and ready to get into the practical stuff. I'm really interested in those do's and don'ts, those insider tips that can make or break a project.
Yeah, the presentation has some really good advice on that. It uses real-world examples to highlight what works and what to avoid.
Okay, so let's start with the juiciest. What's the first tip for aspiring medical writers?
The presentation really stresses the importance of clear communication, especially when it comes to availability. Like if a writer is going to be unavailable for whatever reason, vacation, family emergency, whatever, they should let their team know ASA.
Yeah, that seems pretty basic, but I can see how important it would be. especially in a fast-paced environment where everyone's working together.
Oh, absolutely. It's about being respectful of everyone's time and making sure things run smoothly. No one likes surprises, especially when you're working with deadlines.
And speaking of deadlines, I imagine those are pretty important in this field.
Oh, they're crucial. Medical writing often has very tight deadlines, so sticking to those deadlines is really important for keeping projects on track.
So yeah, reliability and good time management are super important.
For sure. And to keep things running smoothly, the presentation also talks about how important it is to keep the writer in the loop. If there's any changes to the project or the program.
So like updates to the research, changes in strategy, or any new information that might affect the document.
Exactly. It's all about being proactive and making sure everyone's on the same page. The writer needs to have the most up-to-date info to avoid having to redo things and to make sure the document is accurate.
Right. It's like making sure everyone has the right map before they set off on a trip.
Perfect analogy. Another important do is to give actionable comments during the review process.
So instead of just saying what's wrong, reviewers should offer specific ways to fix it.
Exactly. It's about giving constructive criticism that helps the writer make real improvements. So instead of saying something like, this section is unclear, a reviewer might say, try adding an example here to illustrate this point.
Yeah, that's way more helpful. It's like the difference between saying, this painting needs something, and try adding a splash of blue over there.
That's a great way to put it. And to make those changes even more effective, it's really helpful to provide specific references or source documents.
Right, so the writer has evidence to support their revisions.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That way, the document is grounded in solid research, and any changes made are justified.
Okay, so we've covered some great do's. Now let's get to those don'ts, the things writers should watch out for.
All right, the first one might seem obvious, but it's worth saying. Don't ignore questions or forget to get back to the medical writer.
It sounds like common courtesy, but I can see how it could easily happen when everyone's busy.
It's easy to let emails slip through the cracks, but clear and prompt communication is so important even for simple questions. Ignoring questions can really slow things down and create roadblocks.
Yeah, it's about creating a respectful environment where everyone feels heard.
Exactly. Another don't is sending out multiple versions of a document to the whole team.
Oh, wow. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
It can be. It's important to have a good system for sharing and revising documents. That way you avoid version control issues and everyone's working on the most up-to-date file.
So having a centralized platform or a clear workflow for managing documents is really important.
Absolutely. And here's a don't that might surprise some people. Don't get too hung up on minor wording issues.
So don't get lost in the weeds.
Exactly. While grammar and clarity are important, you have to keep the big picture in mind, the overall message, the key takeaways, the impact you want the document to have.
So don't let perfectionism on little details overshadow the main point of the writing.
Exactly. Another common mistake is skipping those comment review meetings.
I imagine those meetings are pretty important for discussing feedback and making sure everyone's on the same page.
Oh, absolutely. If you skip those meetings, it can lead to misinterpretations, missed opportunities for making things better, and ultimately a less effective document.
It's a good reminder that even though a lot of the work is done individually, collaboration and communication are key throughout the entire process.
For sure. And finally, the presentation says don't wait until the last minute to actually read the document.
So don't procrastinate on the review process. Good advice for everyone, not just medical writers.
It applies to any writing project. It's much better to review the document throughout the writing process, not just at the end. That way you can catch potential problems early on, give more effective feedback, and end up with a higher quality final product.
Yeah, it's about staying engaged the whole time, not just showing up at the finish line.
That's a great way to put it. So those are some of the most important do's and don'ts to remember for medical writing.
It's a good reminder that communication, collaboration, and attention to detail are really important in this field.
You got it. And the presentation wraps up by mentioning some medical writing organizations. They offer resources and support for people who are interested in this career path.
Yeah, there's the American Medical Writers Association,
Yeah.
the Australian Medical Writers Association, the European Medical Writers Association, and the Indian Medical Writers Association. It's a global network of professionals.
And they provide networking opportunities, professional development resources, and a sense of community for medical writers at all levels.
It's great to know that those resources are out there. We've covered so much in this deep dive. We explored what medical writing is, the different types, the skills you need to be successful, and the steps involved in creating those important documents.
It's been a really interesting journey learning about this crucial but often overlooked part of clinical research.
Before we wrap up, I want to thank London Heartbeat Zed Academy again for their support in making these conversations happen. If you're interested in learning more about healthcare, be sure to check out their courses and subscribe to their social media channels. You can find them on Facebook, Instagram, Spotify, and YouTube.
They're an amazing resource for anyone who wants to learn more and explore different careers in healthcare.
So as we finish our deep dive into the world of medical writing, I want to leave you with this thought. The next time you read about a groundbreaking medical discovery or a new treatment that offers hope, take a moment to appreciate the medical writers who help make that information understandable and accessible.
They're the bridge between complex science and the public. They make sure that life-changing discoveries reach the people who need them most.
Until next time, keep those brains engaged and never stop exploring.